few years ago, something very weird happened with my best friend and I. I was 15 years old. One night I decided to sleep over at my friend's house. After a night of scary movies, we were in the mood to do something exciting. Not far from my friend's house was a demolishing site, a block of houses in a very terrible state that would be demolished the day after tomorrow. The local government would demolish them to make room for new houses. The whole site was fenced in and warning signs saying "Do not enter" hung everywhere. The houses were boarded up by planks. Doors and windows were sealed shut. No one could get in. We decided to go for a walk on the old block and take some random photographs. My friend knew a spot where we could enter the old block. When we walked there, we noticed that every house was boarded up tight, so we couldn't get in. We noticed a house with a window on the top floor that wasn't very well boarded up. We could see into the room. We took a photo with a digital camera. Later we went home and took a look at the pictures we made. Suddenly, we came across the photo of the window. We saw a woman dressed in a brown raincoat with white skin and black hair as long as we could visibly see. The woman looked very sad. We hadn't seen any woman up there when we took the picture. Moreover, the windows and doors were boarded. We went back to the house to see if that was correct. After investigation, it really was. Everything was tied shut, and there was no woman. This story isn't mine, but rather of my friend from Japan. I'll call him Rita. It happened back when Rita was only about 11 or 12 years old. Rita was a rather attractive kid and had his fair share of admirers. One girl was extreme with her crush though. I'll call her Ayano. Ayano was a lot older than Rita. She was 17. She was an acquaintance of Rita and lived down the road from him. Rita hadn't thought much of her until she started stalking him. Every day and every night, she would be following him one way or another, whether it be in person or online. Rita first started getting the creeps when she would start messaging him over 20 times a day. Stuff like, "Be safe," "Are you alright?" "Sleep well," etc. This was a little weird, but he overlooked it. Then the messages started getting creepier. Instead of the usual checkup emails, they got more personal. Things like, "You should eat your lunch," if he skipped lunch, or "I think your sister is hungry," when his little sister was crying. Rita stopped using both his phone and social media at this point, but it doesn't end there. Rita's mother was almost never home, so he was frequently looked after by babysitters. One day he had a new babysitter. It was Ayano. Nothing was particularly strange as she looked after him and his siblings, but she did get a lot closer to his mother than he would like. One day at school, Ayano approached Rita and told him that his mother would be out of the country for a week, and that she told her to let Rita stay at her house. Rita was hesitant at first, but hey, it was his mother's wish. He couldn't go against that. Ayano told him that his mother had already left, so he could go home with her after school that day. Rita reluctantly agreed and went home with her. When he got there, her parents weren't home. Things get a little blurry here as my friend choked up telling the story, as it still scares him today. He said Ayano would play weird games with him, stuff like Family, where she insisted she was the wife and he was the husband, as well as things like Cops and Robbers, and games to see who would get scared first, where she would blindfold him and leave him in a silent room for hours on end. It was 5 days into staying at her house, and Ayano had gone to her part-time job. She had left the doors locked and the windows were too high to jump from, so he just stayed in front of the TV, where he saw a chilling news report. It was a missing child report, the missing child being him. Before he had the time to catch the number to call, the TV switched off, and Ayano was standing behind him with the remote in her hand. Rita had freaked out, crying and screaming. Ayano held him, but he managed to wiggle from her grasp just in time to open a window and cry for help. Luckily for him, a couple were walking past, heard his cries and called the police. Within an hour, Police arrived and found him locked in her bedroom with a blindfold and his hands tied. Due to Ayano still being a minor, Rita is unsure of what happened to her. He says he only remembers the police taking her away while his mother was hugging him. He moved to Australia after this and hasn't seen his kidnapper since, but he still cowers at the sound of her name. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommates that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I went down a short side street in order to loop back down my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked and I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point that I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the fuck? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him got bigger and bigger. He was coming back my way. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of my way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.